I think readers like the idea that things can go terribly wrong. The worst thing can happen, human life taken, and that there can be some kind of justice. And I also think another part of the appeal is that a lot of us get very devoted to our detectives. So there's a little bit of a parasocial relationship with your detective. You sort of glom onto them and think, I'm in the hands of this particular person and I can see the world through their eyes. So there's there's a kinship that develops with those of us who love crime fiction, particularly when we read series and we fall in love with our investigators and their friends and their sidekicks. And it's also a way for us to examine different worlds. So all of the crime fiction I love takes me into worlds I'm quite interested in, that I also have, I also don't want to actually visit, but I get to visit in the books. And so that's part of what I was trying to develop with the Helen Thorpe series. That was the first thing I knew when I knew I wanted to write a crime story, sort of a cozy adjacent crime story, is that I'm devoted to the idea of butlers. I greatly admire the craft of keeping a beautiful home. I don't, but I really think that would be really something to have a butler, or to be a butler was actually something I was very interested in. Unfortunately, I don't think I have the skill set. And, Bertie and Jeeves probably dates back to Bertie and Jeeves. I'm very interested in the power dynamics between the people who employ butlers and the butler, like the idea that often the butler's secretly in charge. I find that very interesting and appealing. So it was a whole schmozzle. And also, of course, butlers now that we're in this era of our new Gilded Age, there is a renaissance of butlers. So well-off families have butlers now, just as they did before the Great Wars. There's a lot of butlers floating around among the super rich. And so it just seemed like a rich place to start. A good butler is meant to be, they're there, they anticipate everybody's needs, they know what people want before they actually have to say they want it, and they're not meant to be heard. So they tend to be observant. I did an interview with Charles McPherson, who's Canada's most famous butler, a few months ago. He had me on his radio program. It was fascinating. And talking to him, I got the idea that that's exactly what happens, is once in a while, someone will say to the butler, and he has been the butler, what did you think of that? And they, occasionally get the opportunity to say, I thought perhaps that, yeah, I thought you handled that well, or you didn't. I was absolutely fascinated by that. And that dynamic is at play in every butler story that I read. I read a number of historical stories, especially British ones that have a butler and an investigator, and the butler is a longtime family retainer who knows all the dynamics and is often a little bit concerned about the decision making of their principal. Love all of that stuff. So I've been using different locations on the island as my inspiration. So the stories are set at a place, a made-up retreat center, which is where my butler has her initial training, running a large establishment, taking care of people in that particular way. And so it was partly based on Hollyhock, a place where I've spent a lot of happy hours in meditation. I just renamed it and made it quite a bit more absurd than it is. I'm a devoted fan of Hollyhock, and so I made it my own island and my own place. But I acknowledged Hollyhock, and they sold the book for a while, saying, this they were really generous about it. I made up an island for contemplation of a crime that sits in between Protection Island and Seisuchun, because I thought, we could squeeze an island in there that would do what I want. And the other part of the inspiration for that is Yellow Point Lodge, which is another place where I love going to Yellow Point Lodge. So people who've been to Yellow Point will recognize a lot of the elements of Yellow Point Lodge when they read the book. I don't know if it's just laziness or I just like writing books set where I spend time. My main character, the butler, Helen, is the kind of person, so if anybody has a hope of helping people to find their true nature, their connection with other human beings, to let go of all the dialogue and the narrative around who's good, who's bad, who's right, who's wrong, Helen has that ability. And so I thought, okay, well, I want to see what Helen could do with people way out on the ends of the political spectrum. And so that was the starting place. And I'm also really interested in the idea that there are a lot of organizations that have started in recent years that are specifically devoted to trying to establish dialogue between people who don't like each other. Like really, really don't like each other, because I don't think that we're going to get any better until we, first of all, acknowledge each other's humanity and worth, and let go of all those stories and get into like, okay, do you matter? What's good about you? Everybody has something that's good about them. And so was a starting place. And then I, of course, introduce a murder, which throws it all into chaos. Well, the book is, I mean, it's comedy about things that actually aren't that funny. I wanted to see if I could make these people, number one, start out like just overtly unpleasant in every possible way, just really off-putting, and then see what is interesting about this person. Can I make everyone sympathize with the reader, sympathize with them, the other characters in the book sympathize with them? And I wanted to see if I could find a way to help them work together, even though they suspect each other, which, of course, so many of us do suspect each other of horrific crimes of thinking and beliefs and all the rest of it.